Hello, everyone. This devotional is going to be called Thorns. We are all familiar with the expression, he has a thorn in his side. And we all have those thorns. They can be physical, they could be mental, they could be shortcomings, or they could be physical pain. They could be mental shortcomings that cause mental pain to ourselves and to others. They could be anything. It could be a gambling problem, an addiction. It could be, again, anger. It could be lust. Um, the most noticeable person uh, that had a thorn that wanted it alleviated in the Bible was Paul, of course, who wrote most of the New Testament. And several times, 3 times in fact, he asked God to remove his thorn, and God did not do so, and it causes us to wonder why. So I guess that leads us to a question of what is the thorn's purpose? Speaking for myself, I have several, and the longest lasting one I'm aware of is when I was a child. I got the mumps and they didn't break out fast enough, and it caused me to become cross-eyed, and it screwed up my vision. And to this day, I have really weird vision. I only actually focus out of my right eye, and my left eye only sees peripherally. Now I can actually switch eyes and look out of my left eye and watch what happens. See what happens? So this is embarrassing. It used to be. It doesn't bother me anymore. But uh, why? Why'd that happen to me? They say today that it can be fixed, but chances are like 50-50, and I'm not going to try that. The point is, we all have these thorns. So why didn't God fix Paul's thorn? And the exact nature of his thorn in the flesh is uncertain. Probably there's a good reason that we don't know what it is, so that we can all relate to the story better. God likely wanted Paul's difficulty to be described in general terms, so that any difficulty we may face, it would become pertinent. So when God said to him, my grace is sufficient for you, my power is made perfect in weakness, this was in 2 Corinthians 12:9. And we need to keep this in mind. I think it's important for us to understand that some people get a thorn that ultimately leads to their death. And now God doesn't give us these thorns. These thorns occur to us. They happen to us because we're in a fallen world. Some thorns we bring on ourselves through different addictions, whatever it may be. It may be over shopping. It may be drugs. It may be alcohol, gambling, and some of these things can be controllable. You maybe come from a family that had a very angry mom or dad, and as we grow up, we end up having those same kind of traits. But some of these things are controllable, especially with help from the Holy Spirit. And again, we need to keep in mind that, think about this. Paul wrote most of the New Testament. I can imagine him getting a bit haughty about that. I mean, hey, aren't you the guy that wrote all that stuff? And he was, and I could see where he could get puffed up about that. So, God could have allowed the affliction that Paul had simply to keep him humble, to remind him that he is dependent on God for everything, and God told him, my grace is sufficient, carry on. And he wanted Paul to realize that there were just some things God wasn't going to fix for him, to keep him in a position where he stayed grounded and came to understand that that was God's will for him, and finally he accepted it, which we have to do in some cases too. Now, I had a friend one time who was given as it turns out, a false diagnosis for cancer. And this friend was told that she was going to die from cancer. And her husband looked at her in front of me and said, how are we going to handle this? And she said, I'm going to teach my grandchildren how a Christian dies. And I thought that was extraordinary. Well, of course, later it came about that it was an incorrect diagnosis, and she's actually still with us to this day, 20, 30 years later. But that was an amazing response when I first heard that. And so, yes, we have thorns. God relieves some of them. God doesn't relieve some of them. There's a reason we have these thorns, and we need to look at that sometimes. God causes everything to happen for our own good and for His own good. God embroiders everything together in the Bible, and everything knits together to reach His purpose and His plan. So, keeping this in mind, the next time you ask God about a thorn in your side, if He doesn't take it away, look for the biblical answer to that. Don't turn inward, turn outward to God, and strengthen your faith and your resolve. Love you, church.